They call it the gates of hell, and honestly, they might be underselling it. When the first Portuguese explorers hit this 500-kilometer stretch of Namibia, they didn't plant a flag, they dropped to their knees and prayed. They had just discovered the largest open-air graveyard on the planet. Welcome to the Skeleton Coast, a place where the Atlantic Ocean doesn't just sink you, it hunts you. Just to give you an idea of what we are dealing with, look closely at this desert. That rusted mountain of iron in the distance isn't a mirage playing tricks on your eyes. That is the Edward Bolen, a 2,000-ton German ocean liner currently parked in a sandbox. And here's the kicker. It's sitting nearly a mile away from the water. You don't need a maritime degree to know that parking a boat a mile inland is a catastrophic failure. But the ocean didn't put it there. The desert swallowed it alive. If you want to survive this story, like, share, and subscribe. To truly understand the predatory nature of this coastline, we have to look at November 1942. The world was tearing itself apart in the Second World War, but the passengers of a British ship called the Dunedin Star were about to realize the ocean was far deadlier than any German U-boat. It was a heavily armed cargo vessel carrying munitions, supplies, and exactly 106 people, including 21 civilian passengers, some of them infants. At 10:30 p.m., the massive steel hull violently collided with an uncharted, submerged obstacle near the Clan Alpine Shoal. The ship was rapidly taking on freezing water, forcing the captain into a desperate gamble. He deliberately drove the sinking 13,100 behemoths straight into the sands of the Skeleton Coast. He thought hitting dry land was their salvation. He was completely wrong. Getting 106 terrified people through the violent surf and onto the beach was a brutal ordeal. But once they dragged themselves onto the shoreline, the true trap snapped shut. They were completely locked in a barren alien landscape with zero shelter and zero fresh water. The South African military intercepted their distress signal and launched what should have been a standard recovery operation. The Skeleton Coast, however, does not allow escapes. First, the Navy sent a rescue tugboat named the Sir Charles Elliot. The ocean simply chewed it up. The tugboat ran aground, stranding its entire crew and killing 2 sailors in the surf. In a matter of hours, the rescuers had become the victims. Realizing the water was a death sentence, the military shifted tactics to the sky. The bomber was dispatched to drop supplies and airlift the women and children. The pilot spotted a flat salt pan near the beach and executed a flawless landing, but the sand is deceptive. The moment the aircraft stopped moving, the massive wheels sank directly through the crust. The plane was permanently cemented into the earth. Now, the stranded survivors, the stranded tugboat crew, and the stranded bomber pilots were all locked together in the exact same cage. With the ocean completely locked down and the sky effectively neutralized, the military had exactly one option left: a frontal assault across the most hostile terrain on Earth. A massive overland convoy of military trucks and armored vehicles was mobilized from Vin. It was supposed to be a straight shot to the coast, grab the 106 survivors, and drive back. But the map they were using was completely useless. The Skeleton Coast is entirely uncharted because the massive bush and dunes are constantly moving. The trucks hit a wall of bottomless, shifting sand that instantly swallowed their axles. Engines began to literally scream under the strain, tires shredded on hidden rocks, and radiators boiled over in the blistering Namibian sun. Every single mile gained required hours of brutal, back-breaking labor just to dig the machines out of the earth. What was supposed to be a fast extraction turned into a grinding 26-day siege. The rescuers were dying of thirst while trying to reach people dying of thirst. By the time the convoy finally breached the dunes and reached the survivors, the beach looked like a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Against all odds, they loaded the remaining survivors into the battered trucks and turned around. But the desert was not done collecting its toll, because while the convoy struggled back inland, they stumbled upon something utterly terrifying, a discovery that proved the ocean and the sand had been working together to kill humans for centuries. In 1860, a completely separate search party was combing the dunes near the Ugab River, looking for survivors of a different wreck. Instead of survivors, they stumbled into a scene straight out of a psychological horror film. 12 human skeletons, laid out in a perfectly straight, deliberate row. But the desert scavengers hadn't just picked them clean. Every single one of them was missing its skull. There were no scattered bones, no signs of an animal attack dragging the heads away, just 12 decapitated bodies, left to bleach in the blistering sun. Nearby, half buried under a dune, the searchers found a weathered piece of slate. Scratched into the stone was a final, desperate message. I am proceeding to a river 60 miles north, and should anyone find this and follow me, God will help him. Whoever wrote it. And whoever wrote it, and whoever him was, they were walking straight into the most brutal sector of the Namib. Did a survivor take the heads as some macabre warning to others? Did madness entirely consume the crew as the fresh water ran out? Or does the Skeleton Coast hide something much older and much darker in the fog? To understand how the desert captures so much prey, you have to look at its ultimate weapon, a meteorological anomaly that acts as a permanent, blinding smokescreen. This isn't just bad weather. This is a violent collision between two unstoppable forces of nature. flowing directly up from Antarctica, is the Benguela Current. It is a massive river of freezing, nutrient-dense water surging along the Namibian coastline. But sitting right next to it is the Namib, one of the oldest and hottest deserts on the planet. When the blistering air of the desert blows directly over the freezing water of the Benguela, the reaction is instantaneous. It creates a hyperdense sea fog that blankets the coastline for hundreds of miles. For centuries, navigators relying on the stars were instantly blinded the moment they entered this zone. You can't see the sun, you can't see the stars, you can't even see the front of your own ship. Captains would think they were 50 miles out in safe deep water, until the horrifying sound of iron tearing into the sandbar shattered the silence. And even if a ship managed to survive the impact, the Benguela Current had one final trap. The current pushes aggressively toward the shore, creating some of the most violent, unrelenting surf on Earth. Once you hit the sand, the ocean guarantees you will never push your boat back out. You might be thinking all of this is just ancient history, that modern GPS, digital sonar, and satellite radar have finally tamed the gates of hell. But the desert doesn't care about your satellite navigation. Fast forward to August 2008, a massive fishing trawler named Desire was being towed toward India for scrap. It was supposed to be a completely routine, heavily monitored operation, but as the convoy passed near Henties Bay, the Benguela Current woke up. The thick, blinding fog rolled in rapidly, entirely erasing the horizon in minutes. The ocean swelled, lifting Desire high into the air. And then, the violent surf snapped the heavy steel towline like a piece of cheap string. The 21st century vessel was suddenly completely adrift, totally blind in the swirling mist. And exactly like the Edward Bolen a century before, the current dragged it straight toward the sand. Today, the Xyla sits permanently impaled on a shallow sandbank just south of the Ugab River mouth. It is slowly rotting from the inside out in the highly corrosive, salt-heavy air. Its massive, broken skeleton has become a roosting ground for thousands of cormorants, a massive modern monument proving the absolute, undeniable dominance of nature. The coastline hasn't been tamed, it is just patiently waiting for its next meal. The skeleton coast is not a monument to human error, it is an active, geological predator, and it is still hunting. As we speak, the massive Barchan dunes of the Namib are continuing their march westward, pushing the shoreline further and further out into the freezing Atlantic. In another 100 years, the Edward Bolen won't just be a mile inland. It will be entombed entirely beneath a mountain of orange sand, wiped completely off the map, leaving absolutely no trace that humans were ever here at all. The fog will roll in, the currents will surge, and the gates of hell will remain wide open for the next ship. This is Herbert, and this is Plain Mystery. Like, share, and subscribe.